Hello, I'm Lindley Gooden. Welcome to MoneyLIVE's webinar, Unlocking the Power of Data-Driven Banking, Making Better Decisions to Drive Strategic Transformation, hosted in association with SAS. Now, it's essential for every bank to have a strong transformation strategy, isn't it? Alongside effective use of data. Most of us already realize the core role of data, driving emerging technologies, data sharing environments, customer experience. But while the conversations continue apace and the complexity grows, how can banks really cut through the noise, make better data-driven decisions and deliver analytics capabilities across the organization? Well, over the next hour, we'll be tackling the effective management of ever-growing volumes of data. We'll be talking about how you can take your analytics strategy to the next level to generate insights that will drive business growth, increase automation and agility, and optimize complex decisions. Before we do that, let's meet our fantastic panelists today. Angel Serrano, hello. Good to see you.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you here. Angel joined Santander UK in 2017 as the head of data science. Now, he focuses on implementing machine learning solutions to increase the value customers receive. At the same time, reducing costs and boosting efficiencies. Now, before Santander, Angel worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers, both in Spain and in the UK, where he led one of the advanced analytics teams in the financial services sector, implementing machine learning solutions for UK, European clients and regulators too. Great to have you with us. Next up, we have Matt Sattler. Hello, Matt.
Good afternoon.
Matt is the Director of Data Science and Business Development, Data Analytics at HSBC. Now, he joined HSBC in 2013, building data management and analytics platforms in Mexico City and Sao Paulo. There, he experimented with using distributed networks and machine learning to enhance data organization. And that helped to transform overnight how data was cataloged, linked and enriched in the US, followed by a global rollout. Now, Matt has a global team of around 100 experts, an emerging talent program, 2 data labs, 300 applications, and new AI-driven decision-making models. In other words, lots. Good to have you here with us. Thirdly, we have Shashank Khare. Hello.
Hello.
Good to have you with us. Shashank is the head of group strategy at Lloyds Banking Group. Now, he currently supports the board and the C-suite at Lloyds Banking Group in strategy formulation with a particular focus on digital, data and analytics capability. His experience spans capital markets, strategy consulting and agile delivery too. He was previously a fixed income trader, strategy consultant and product owner of an agile lab, building digital tools to equip commercial bank relationship managers with data and analytics. Great to have you with us too.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least is Tiffany Carpenter. Hello, Tiffany.
Hi.
Great to have you here. Tiffany is the UKI Head of Customer Intelligence Solutions at SAS. Now, she's spent over 20 years helping organizations to transform customer experience across their sales, service and marketing operations. In her current role, she guides organizations on the application of advanced analytics and artificial intelligence to harness customer insights and deliver one-to-one experiences. Very handy that is too. Okay, so over the next hour, we have lots to cover. I'm sure you'll have your own questions and comments for us, and we really want you to put them to our panel today. It's simple and easy. Either send them in using the Twitter hashtag, which today is very simple, bankingdata20, while you're watching us live, or submit them on the feed right here on our webpage. We'll get to as many as we can towards the end of the discussion. Your voice will drive the last 10 to 15 minutes, so get in touch whenever you have a question, if not before. Okay. First, let's think about what data sets banks have traditionally focused on. We often hear that data is the new oil. Is that true? Well, Matt, kick us off. You know, how true is that, do you think, in banking?
I definitely think it's true.
Yeah.
Data, no dissimilar to oil, is a natural resource.
Yeah.
I think what gets fundamentally missed, and even when the first time the article came out, is the process of making data usable. Data in itself is a raw material, but you have to make it usable to drive business value, and there's a process no dissimilar to oil of getting there.
Yeah, it's not much use in its crude state, Shashank.
Absolutely. I think it's rather than saying data is the new oil, I think the focus is more on the technology, because it's about data has always existed with banks for ages. It's about the technology now which can extract that data, refine it, and actually then build the tools which can use it to deliver insights.
Yeah. The other thing that we're talking about today is clearly digital transformation. So how much do you think good data, good insights from that data, as we're talking about, the processed state, can drive digital transformation in broad terms. Tiffany?
Yes, so I think as Shashank says, banks have always had access to tremendous amounts of customer and transactional data, but they're just not fully exploiting it to deliver customer experiences. And a lot of people worry about the amount of data that the likes of Google or Facebook might hold about you. But in fact, the data points they have are just a fraction of the data that a bank actually holds about you. In fact, banks probably have the deepest and most personal data set about you of any institution.
And my financial details are pretty relevant to me, so it's really relevant information to customers as well.
But as a bank customer, you rarely receive those kind of personalised and tailored offerings that you would expect from these other organisations.
Absolutely.
So I think there's huge opportunity for banks to start to exploit these huge data sets to deliver on the customer experience.
Angel, take it apart for us. You know, what sort of key areas are there that we need to look at and that can drive transformation?
Absolutely. So banks have legacy systems. A lot of banks have been there for a lot of systems that financial institutions have been there from the 70s, 80s, are not created originally to cope with the data and with the needs that we have right now. So in order to deal with that, a data quality and control team is quite a strong team, and capability is critical for the success of the whole journey. Also, extract all this information and upload it in an area where you can join all these different data sets and create a 360 view of the customer is absolutely critical. So therefore, a data engineering capability is fundamental. And also the final part of the puzzle is the advanced analytics. So how to create models and how to identify signal from the noise, how to get the right information from the entire vast of data volume.
Matt, which way round is it? Do you take data into strategic transformation, or do you take strategic transformation to inform your data and use it that way? What do you do?
I think of it a little bit differently, if I may. I don't think strategic transformation is a side project. Right? It's not a thing. And I also don't think data is just an initiative that you want to have on the side. It has to be embedded into the overall strategy. Business strategy has to be data-centric. They have to be embedded together. It's an ecosystem, if you like. And so they have to all be interconnected and work together as part of day-to-day in order for data to be very successful within an organization.
And Shashank, I think people will realise that they'll know that they've had to change quite substantially in the last few years, from pushing out a strategy that kind of fits the model they'd like to see in their business to a real feedback loop.
Absolutely. I think with the data which is now available, not just with the banks, but across sort of organizations with the banks can partner with, and the technology, as Angel said, with the advanced analytics, you can actually get feedback loops operating which inform your decisions for the future, and you can have a more flexible and agile strategy going in rather than here's a monolithic 5-year plan.
Yeah. Tiffany, what do you think? I mean, working with your clients, I guess you're seeing that it won't always work in the smooth way because there's a big change to make. But are you seeing that change, that the overall holistic view of your organisation is starting to be accepted, used, and really practiced in business?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of focus, as Angel said. Traditionally, banks have optimised their data around kind of business functions, channels and products. So there's a lot of focus right now on kind of consolidating all of that data and getting it into data lakes. But I think with the emphasis on consolidation of data, we risk kind of missing the point, which is that it's not actually about the data, it's about the decisions that we want to make with that data. I think actually your data culture is actually your decision culture.
That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, Angel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you need the right information to extract the right insights that you are looking for, and it has to be embedded on the strategy of the company, of course. That is critical. So every time that we create a strategy or we design a plan, it has to be aligned to the strategic objectives of the bank in this case, or whatever the customer sees in your case.
What big challenges, Tiffany, do you think there are in terms of transformation with data in mind? What are the really big common challenges that banks face?
I think one of the biggest challenges that the banking industry has faced as a whole is this whole change in consumer expectations over the last few years. Technology has really empowered consumers. So if you think about the internet, social media, mobile devices, they've really fundamentally changed the way that consumers expect to engage with their financial institutions. And so I think it's no longer good enough really just to kind of produce the same kind of products and services just through some new channels, as it were.
That's very true. I suppose the need to internally sort out your operations has been a big challenge as well. Matt, but that can be a focus, and if that's too much of a focus, you kind of miss the point of all this.
Yeah, absolutely, and you have to do a little bit of both. You definitely want to understand what decisions do you want to make, but also understanding that there is a future, and putting all of this data together allows you to start to create new types of decisions. So there's a bit of a balance of really making sure that we focus on what does the customer want, but at the same time investing in data as itself, because it is an asset, right? If you do process it, we talked about in the beginning, right? If you do process it, you do clean it, you do have good quality data, you build that customer 360, that is an asset in itself.
Yeah, I think there's sort of that parallel track where you achieve the golden mean, where you say, okay, there is some data which I'm going to sort of extract, refine, clean based on use cases which deliver value, get you the stakeholder backing. But there's the bigger piece, the vision, that is, I want to collect all this data which provides me context, because down the line it's going to be supremely valuable and give me a competitive advantage.
A lot of knots from you, Matt.
No, absolutely. No, seriously, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. There is that balance, and we have to bring people along that journey, but there has to be that vision to say, I know data is going to be core to my business model in the future. There's products and services that we can offer to clients in the future if we start harnessing and harvesting that data.
So do you think that, this is a big question, and we talked about this for a moment before we came on today, are banks being ambitious enough? I'll tell you, all the conversations I have is, small steps, tag it on the outside, see how it tests, but do you think ambition is more is needed?
So I think there is a sort of a quantum duality to this answer. Yes, banks are being ambitious. So if you look at the amount of investment and the effort which is going in, and the immense sort of teams being established, the data engineering being central to a lot of transformation efforts, so that there is a lot of movement, there is a lot of investment. On the flip side, no, they are not being ambitious enough, because I think a lot of the use cases are still sort of incremental, pushing the envelope a little bit more. Whereas with the technology and the data now, you can actually reshape how the model works, reshape business processes. So effectively, I think we are stuck we are sort of as an industry going the Nokia way of, go from Nokia 3310 to a Nokia N900, and the danger is someone comes in and slams an iPhone.
And I think that's really interesting, because I think we've seen since 2008 increased competition in the market, so got challenger banks and fintechs. But I think we're now about to see a new wave of disruption from the big successful technology companies, so the Apples, the Amazons, the Googles, who are all making inroads into financial services, and they're the ones that are going to come in with something completely new.
The thing about it is, Tiffany, that in Shashank's quantum duality that you talked about, in one of them, Schrodinger's cat died, or was dead in some state. I mean, it's such a big risk. Matt, what do you think about this?
You really have to rebuild, and building an architecture. What technology is enabling us to do is have a scalable architecture that allows you to be data-centric, right? Expectations are changing, right? We are living in this new digital things at your fingertip type of world. And there is technology in order to do that. And I think, Angel, you said in the very beginning, we've been faced with legacy architectures, infrastructure that has been built inorganically over time. And so in order to really do that, I think there's the opposite view of you have to really rebuild, have that architecture from scratch, and that is an ambitious goal, and that is an ambitious investment.
Without doubt. I guess one of the ways to make this, to sugar the pill, is to think about the business value, about what you can get out of this, Angel. So how can you bring that forward in terms of how data can deliver digital transformation? How can you focus on that as a business?
So as a business, it doesn't make too much sense to re-architecture everything, not because it doesn't make sense, it's because it might not be possible at this point. So, as I said at the beginning, you might have applications from the 70s that they might not exist, or something similar is not existing in the market right now. So the need of a strategic goal with a business case and a use case value attached is critical. So that allows you to do that in a part of the organization. So for example, if you are doing it in mortgages, you just need to restructure the mortgages business, not the entire portfolio. That simplifies the problem, not simplifies, but makes it smaller. So.
In some ways, talking about simplicity, you can't just focus on, it's an old way of thinking to think the greater business value, the better income and revenue is through doing this. That's pushing out a solution again. Actually, what this enables you to do is to listen to customers and what their behaviors and their patterns are and so on. So that's good, isn't it? I mean, that's essentially, if you take past the value to the business and more about what customers want, and then they will come to you. Is that a way to look at it?
Absolutely. I think it's what ultimately drives value is the customers. So if you can provide them what they need, and to do that, you need to understand them, what is it that they want, how do they want to interact, and not everyone would want to do it in the same way. And that's what data now gives you.
It allows better decision making as well.
Absolutely. So sort of you have if you look at decisions, there are two big categories I'd like to think of. One is around the customer engagement. So how do you want to interact, let's say, to acquire customers or to engage existing customers? There's a bit around how do you develop the proposition, so the features, the pricing, and all of that. And for all of this, you need data to inform and then sort of put them together to give a compelling proposition to the customer.
So just very quickly, let's just look at the customer experience. We all know our own individual experiences of what the customer experience needs to be or what their expectations are. But Tiffany, what do you think has changed in terms of the use of our use of data, the responsiveness we can offer as banks? How has that changed our customer expectations, and how have customer expectations moved us into that area? What's been the big thing?
Yes, I think consumers today are they're much more impatient, and they want these instant experiences. And so I think timeliness is of the essence, really, in the way that banks are able to detect and react to these signals or inferred needs when customers are interacting with us, and in all of that kind of behavioural data. So
that's one. So I'll throw it around. That's one. So speed, real-time response, and insights. Consistency? What do you think, Matt?
Well, I think, and I would add an understanding. Contextual understanding of what you want. So you brought in the timeliness. When do you want it? But what do you need at that time? And so really building that holistic context of understanding your needs. Partnering with timeliness, I think.
The third one could be the how. So usually, particularly in the past, in order to speak with your bank, you have to be on the phone, speak for half an hour. They ask you 3 times the same information. From the customer experience point of view, that is not good as a user. Now there are fintechs that from your app, you just type a question, you have the immediate answer through an RPA solution in a matter of seconds. So that how you communicate with the customer is critical for the customer experience.
And finally, very briefly, the outcome. What I'm looking to your services to achieve. That's important too?
Yeah. So I think there is the customer outcome and there is also the business outcome, because how best do you set up your operations to achieve that end result which the customer wants?
Very good. That's really helped us. So we've established quickly how banks are developing transformation strategies, how data fits in, coping with the challenges of managing larger volumes of that stuff, and the new types of data. Let's now explore how banks can use analytics and machine learning practically to optimize customer experience and day-to-day operations. Tiffany, let's start off with customer experiences. How can using data better tailor our experiences as customers and improve relationships? That's really important. Improving relationships is where it's at, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a really effective use of data analytics in a bank is to be able to kind of move away from this one-size-fits-all approach to product offerings and a really channel-specific approach to the way that we engage with customers, and actually use the data and the analytics to build strategies at an individual customer level. So you can actually get down to customer level and account level profitability, and then start to look at customer level actions and next best actions, and then be able to deploy those as individual customer strategies into that customer's journey, regardless of which channel they're choosing to interact with us on.
Great, that's a how. Matt?
You couldn't have said it. Think of it as the segment of one, and it's your individual digital fingerprint. I think we all leave that. And going back to the power of data and what we've been talking about this entire journey is when you can start putting together every single piece of the data that you leave behind after every experience, it creates another piece of that fingerprint. And when you put it all together, it allows me to understand what it is that I'm looking for at that time. So it's exactly what you said. It's really creating that individual segment.
Let's talk about trust for a second. The relationship that I have with any supplier is based on a trust or a, yes, convenience, ease of use. You have the products I want. That's the what. The how is the process, but the why, I would say, is about trust. Is it not?
Well, the why is related to the what. So for me, the what is, and is the why this is important, and it's because as a user, as a customer, I want you to be able to tell me what I want, when I want it, how I want it. So be able to identify that I need a mortgage in 6 months, and you come to me proactively to tell me, by the way, there is a new deal that is customized for you, and this with this rate and these conditions. This is something I was looking for. I was thinking about that, but you have been proactive, and you have identified my need before I even do it.
Right.
So that is the what I need and why I need.
It is, and sorry, please.
So I think, yes, the thing which is difficult to get right in this is you have to tread with care on this, because if you start saying, here's an alert because I know you were, let's say, looking at Rightmove, then it feels like a violation of privacy, and that's the trust angle. So at the moment, I think banks are privileged because customers do trust us with their data and to do the right thing. But it's sort of, you have to explore the boundaries carefully.
Can I ask whoever's feeling happy enough to answer this, really what proof do we need to show that a relationship has improved? Just in very brief terms, Matt, what key signs do you see that can indicate that whether it's trust or whether it's just convenience, that I have a good relationship?
So before I answer some measures, what I would say is, and just taking a step back, part of the challenges we've faced as data practitioners and data leaders is when. When do you show value? Because we live in a world where you should be showing value today, tomorrow. Yeah. And these types of engagements, whether it's the strength of that relationship, how many times are we now communicating, the actual end value, how long are you staying with the relationship, are you leaving, are you taking new products? Yeah. All of these are good indications that our relationship is growing. If you're taking products in areas that we operate and strategically we want to operate, it indicates that our relationship's growing, but that takes time. And so I think there's a management of expectations is when should I start seeing those signs as well.
It's sometimes good to go through a little bit of the detail. That's really useful. In terms of predictive and prescriptive analytics, Ankel, how can they help? How can they help personalisation, which hopefully in turn shows that people stay with you? How do they help?
Yeah, one of the examples is what I just said, talking about trying to identify needs from the customer right before the need happen. That is critical. It's an area where the customer sees the value of the advanced analytics.
And we feel that, don't we?
And
I
we
think
feel that.
If something's, we know the particular retailer online that does this recommends something to you. It doesn't force me to take it.
Yeah.
Just shows me that could be useful to you.
Exactly. And that is where, rather than advertising, becomes a recommendation. That's the difference.
Yeah.
So I'm not recommending to you this product because I believe that is the best for me, and I don't care who you are just a number. Yeah. We have done analysis. This is what you need at this point. Yeah. This is when it becomes valuable. It might not be. Like, for example, you can be looking for a house. You receive an advert with this mortgage for this rate. And even if you don't take it, it serves you as a benchmark. And actually, this is a very good point. Yeah. I might take it, I might not, but it helps me. Yeah. It's a piece of information that helps me. talking about how to improve the customer satisfaction, banks do all kind of programs in order to measure the satisfaction right now. One of the ways is, for example, in Santander, we use the Net Promoter Score. That is one of the standard ones. And it's whatever communication is with the customer, you use the NPS.
Yeah.
So it's a consistent way to measure any interaction with the customer, but it has to be really fast.
Really fast and really accurate. I mean, it has to be genuinely reflecting what they feel about you. The sentiment of that is really important as well. But in terms of AI and machine learning, how is that, you know, maybe in terms of the techniques or technologies, how is that helping to improve the relationship, to offer consistent relationships? How does AI machine learning, in all the forms that we talk about it in, helping?
So I think there's been significant investment in analytics and business intelligence across banks for decision support, as it were. So we're taking those insights and we're passing them to a human or a group of humans so that they can ultimately make a decision off that.
It's those millions of interactions. You know, it can actually take care of so many of those automated bits.
Absolutely. So I think, you know, where you've got big, high-value decisions, that makes sense to pass those insights to a human to make those decisions. But actually, if you think about all of those everyday operational decisions, where there's hundreds of thousands of them being made by frontline employees or dependent applications, they might be of lower value, but the sheer volume of them means that their combined value can actually exceed the value of some of these big decisions. Customer interactions, as you say, is a great example. So on any one day, a bank could be dealing with many thousands, even millions of customer interactions in which a decision has to be made. And I think there's a huge opportunity there to use AI and machine learning to actually deliver much more efficiency and value, not just to automate those decisions, but to optimize them, to ensure that each one of them is accurate, consistent, and actually profitable decision.
Yeah, and just on that note, what machine learning and AI, the forms of AI that we have today do so well is scan through millions of rows of data. And sorry, as humans, we don't do that well. We do not do that well, nor scalable, nor fast. What we do very well is perform empathy, right? Interactions, strategic decisions. So there is this symbiotic type of relationship and symbiotic relationship between where AI can scan through the millions of rows of information. Angel, you said it earlier around the signals and the noise, right? And being able to find those true signals and those features and allowing us as humans to provide that level of empathy and strategic decision making.
And that must be especially true in certain areas of larger investments, say credit and lending. These things, I mean, if we're looking at the micro decisions, that's at one end, many of those. And then the larger decisions, well, you need that empathy.
Absolutely. And you can't allow the machine to do that alone. And we shouldn't, and we wouldn't. And really, that partnership allows us to also then make better offers.
Shashank.
So I think here, I sort of always go back to a chess analogy, because if you look at it to sort of post-97 when Kasparov got defeated, the champions in chess are combined teams of AI and humans, where the AI does the grunt work of seeing 60 moves ahead. The human decides whether that's an optimal strategy or not and being creative. And that's what wins the game.
We haven't really hit operations. All of this has massive implications in operations, but in terms of operational analytics, you know, where are the big advancements, do you think, Shashank, or things that we need to focus on to make the implementation, the integration better, smoother, faster?
So I think it's
a big question.
It is a big question. So I'll try and break it down. I think so there are three big hurdles that banks have to jump across. The first one is the easy one, which is you need to be able to get your data in shape to be able to use it. So that's a lot of investment has gone in. A lot of people have done that. The second bit is you have to then get the right models in place, the right technology in terms of the advanced analytics, the ML. And again, a lot of investment has gone through. And I think the third hurdle, which is the hardest to crack, is around the culture, the ability to then, for the organization to absorb all of that and say, this is how we will now operate. So that it requires change in the business processes. It requires change in the way that people work.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because we all know the figures, and they vary wildly of how many jobs will be left after AI comes in and storms over the workforce. All those things that we've talked about in the past. I'm sure you do it every day in the boardroom. But in terms of decision making, which essentially is the human quality of your organisation, at the moment, the machine learnings and the AIs and the bots of all their types are informing decisions. They're not making decisions. But do you think, Angel, there's a point where decisions could be automated? I mean, there are obviously some already, but just tell us how that's working.
The key word that I always use for this kind of problems that you guys, Matt and Shashank, describe is interpretation.
Yeah.
So advanced analytics can run the analysis, but it's meaningless if there is no one at the end of the model with the results, able to interpret the results and make the decisions. The other day I was at an event and someone said that in 5 years, automation is going to reduce the workforce by 50%.
Yeah.
And it was the Times, New York Times, in the 1932. So this has been there for almost 100 years. And obviously, the workforce is going to reduce because of the automation processes, RPA, robotics. But interpretation is key, and the workforce is going to be different.
And if somebody loves...
But that's a really good point. Workforce will be different.
Yes.
I don't see jobs, actually in every revolution, more jobs are created.
Yeah.
I don't even think we know all of the jobs that will come. Yes, AI will automate decision-making, lower-level decision-making, and it is happening. Yeah. There will be more strategic-level decision-making processes and jobs that aren't existing today because we don't have the bandwidth to do it. If you're spending 80% of your time munging data, you don't have the time in order to think about these new opportunities.
Well, we can't attack this right now really in depth, obviously, but because of our time. But actually, is the job right now to start training your teams, to start to make those decisions and to move people into areas, exciting new areas, hopefully, where they can upskill, modernize their skills. What do you think, Shashank?
Yes, I think it's part of that. So there's a piece around proving that there is value. So because you need the senior stakeholder backing.
Yeah.
There is then the piece around showing people that this is not a replacement exercise here. Yeah. And I think it's a combination because you have the AI and the person working together, because that helps move, let's say, the grunt work out of the job, and that makes it actually enjoyable for the person. But if you don't sort of approach it that way, then it is bound to fail.
We'll continue this right now. We'll come back to you in a second, Tiffany, because this is going to continue. We are about 15 minutes away from your questions, so please do keep sending them in either through the webpage or on Twitter using the hashtag, which today, while you're watching us live, is BankingData20. Get in touch. It's so important that we hear from you, and you will form the last 10 to 15 minutes of our discussion, so we need to hear from you. Okay, so we've dug into the potential of data-driven decisioning to optimize customer experience and operational efficiency, but we haven't yet really covered the changes to the operating model and how people and processes we've just touched on might need to transform as banks make the leap to truly data-driven working. That's why I held off, Tiffany. Let's go back to you right now, because this is important. How can you help? How can the business, the people within the business, start to understand the value of AI and machine learning, the decisions made by as we move forward?
Yeah, I think it's really important that business stakeholders have trust in the decisions that AI will make. Trust is a huge thing, and they need to be able to understand how the decisions were made by an algorithm without necessarily needing to understand the algorithm itself. And actually, there's at SAS we talk about a FATE framework, FATE. So that stands for fairness, accountability, transparency, and explainability. And I think analytical teams implementing this type of FATE framework can help business stakeholders kind of understand the inputs and the outputs in terms of any AI system and ensure that that the results are explainable in a really consumable way, as it were.
That's really important. People do need to be perhaps a little bit more across the tech than they have been previously, but it's quite a way to go to convince a workforce perhaps who are really good at people skills until you tell them people skills. That's going to be really useful in the future. For developers, yes, you're going to have a great future. What about the people in the middle, the people who make decisions? What happens to them, Matt?
They're now able to make and do the level 2 type of decisions that they aren't able to do today. Right. And it's because they're spending more of their time still trying to interpret what's happening in reality. And we see it all the time. And where we're really impacting and changing is how we're giving them new opportunities to really stress how they can help customers in new different types of ways.
Angel, does that make sense to you? And you know, in the conversations, without confidentiality too much, in those conversations you might have had with people, has there been a smile? Has there been a, oh, that's actually quite exciting, I could do this in the future, I've been meaning to train in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, well, the fact that there is a hype with advanced analytics, it helps. I mean, everyone is interested on doing that and using it. So from the business point of view, as a user, it gives me the ability to have analysis that I didn't have before. And from the technical point of view, as a, let's say, workforce, is if you are already in the analytics space, business intelligence, it's a really nice move and a new skill set to learn in order to improve in your career. Nice.
Shashank, what about you? That's a really nice conversation, a nice form of words that could actually encourage people to get involved. What do you think? Any strategies, any ways to get buy-in across the organisation?
So I think if you start with sort of the senior stakeholders, and again, so looking at it from a very business, not a tech perspective, all I care about is whatever black box I'm using, does it give the right output? And it's not about trying to explain how the algorithm works. It's just, so for example, that much publicized case of the HR AI with gender bias. So if you do the output, and the output you put in two CVs which are exactly the same, except one is labeled male, one is labeled female, and it picks up the male one more than 50% of the times, there is a problem.
That's right.
You can solve it that way. So you get sort of that buy-in. You don't want to create new risk. You need to assure people that it's complying with all the regulation. There isn't hidden sort of tail events out there. Then the second bit is, I think, which we've talked about, is how do you get buy-in from the larger organization that people start using it? Because you can create the best tool, but if I'm still wedded to my Excel, then it's wasted.
That's right.
But honestly, I have to go back to Tiffany's point, and for all those that are listening, I think that FATE framework is absolutely critical, because also what's really being talked about now is what are the inputs that you're using in that AI model? Should I be using that data? Is it fair? Is it right? And the ethics around how it's being used, also uncovering the black box. So I think what you brought up is a perfect wide spectrum. And so for anyone that's really looking to implement it, I do think going and looking at it from end to end, explainability all the way to your inputs is absolutely critical.
And that diversity of data and the ideas. I mean, you need ideas on what's important to my organisation, what I'm seeing on the front line, and so on. There are other terms available for that. But you know, if you get more ideas from your workforce as well as from customers, well, you're getting a much better view, a much more accurate view, and probably a real-time view too. It's important to gather that stuff, isn't it? What about, Matt, the people at the top of the organisation, the board, who, look, they're brilliant normally. You would never say anything to them normally, but they may not have buy-in yet on the whole data centricity of my organisation. How do you get them involved?
So before answering that, just take a quick step back, because I do think that there's still an assumption that C-level executives are not data-driven.
Right.
And I don't think that that's necessarily true for all C-level executives. There are really data-driven executives that are putting business strategies. Let's take that quickly aside, because I do think that that's absolutely in our workforce today. But for those that aren't, and I think Shashank said it quite perfectly just a few minutes ago around making it real, making it impactful, and we've been talking about this entire time, making it about the customer. Right? It has to go back to the customer. How do we improve our business model? How do we impact more lives? And when your C-level executives are talking to shareholders and impacting new strategies, it really comes back to that. So I think it's our job in not making it the next data science experiment, but really bringing it back to the business.
I think that the challenge there is there is no understanding or appreciation. The challenge is what they don't want is this massive white elephant sort of being constructed somewhere, which gives me no value, and I don't know what's going on. I think you have to convince them on the fact that there is value, as you said. And if you can do that, then they're receptive, right?
You've got to be able to operationalise this investment in data science and analytics. You know, if you've got a bunch of people in a lab doing something that the executives don't understand, there's no value there. So the outputs of the analytics have to be deployed into the operations, into your systems of action, whether that's your websites or your mobile apps or your customer service applications, and they need to be deployed in real time, as it were, so they actually are delivering business value.
So how do you focus on, you need to focus on the first steps first and getting those strands, those channels right, but it takes a bit of time to get your view right again. So we're taking a step back, we're looking at what we're trying to achieve, we're looking at the business, who we are, getting the data cleansed and getting a full view of what you've got, and then you're trying to move that forward. But you can't jump the gun, can you? You have to get those things right, the ideas right, before you can start to implement. Is that right?
Yeah, and also, as you correctly said, the buying from the customer, from the business and the C-suite. When I have a conversation with a C-suite and I'm trying to convince them or persuade to use advanced analytics, you obviously cannot go to a technical conversation because they get lost. And what I normally say is, look, what you have been able to see today is a picture of today's situation or the past. What I'm giving you is the ability to predict the future. Would you like to predict the future? Not in your business, in your life. And the question I always get asked is, so you can tell me who's going to win the Premier League? I mean, and I said, yes, absolutely. If you give me the right data, I can give you with a percentage or an estimation who is going to win the Premier League. And
they used to call that a crystal ball.
Yes. The conversation gets better, easier to understand, and you avoid technical terms, technical conversations, and it starts in a better way.
Let's talk about business model for a second. How can you start to innovate around your business model, starting to take all of these great things that we talked about today, the ideas that we have? Every set of ideas will apply only to your organization, really, but how do you start to adapt your business model, your way of working? And that's very much about the people and how they work in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at the success factors of these big, successful technology organizations, the Apples, Amazon, Googles, their business model is all about a relentless focus on the customer. If you take Amazon, their motto is start with the customer and work backwards rather than the other way around. And their vision from the very outset was, we want to be the most customer-centric company on the earth. So I think there's an opportunity for banks to innovate around that business model and to really start to make that much more customer-centric.
Interestingly, as a customer of you guys and also those guys, it's the small things. It's not necessarily the model that I notice, it's the small things. It's the referral engines. It's the things that I use, those tools that I use that make me think, I'll go back to that. It's those little elements of magic that often make a difference from a consumer point of view. Okay, what about people like Amazon, the big tech firms? What lessons can you take from them? Maybe from the way they work, maybe their attitude. Of course, you'd love to have the entire engine and work out how that can apply to your business, but in lieu of that, what else?
Absolutely, but one of the things is from this company is easy to access, easy to use. Yeah. So in one click, I go to my main screen and I see what I want to see. Probably in 2 clicks, 3 clicks, I have bought whatever I wanted. Yeah. So that customer experience is, from the user point of view, is priceless. Yeah. Being able to identify what I want before I even notice it is, I don't know.
And you know what, if we're talking about little predictive tools, which are so useful to us, if you're an insurer, different industry, but if you're an insurer, having a recommendation as to how I can allay myself from the problems that I might face, that's good. Trust, advisory, those things are important, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's knowing when I need this, because especially if you're impacting businesses, maybe global businesses, local businesses, right? I'm expanding, I'm growing, I need access to capital. Right. There's different things, but I need them at certain times. And so having a framework that knows when I need it, that's where it becomes personalized, right? Because having a recommendation system that tells me, go after these type of cash management products might be great, but maybe I don't need that. Maybe that's not the right thing for me at that time. So I think that's where it becomes personalized, when you know when somebody needs something.
Tiffany.
And I think, that's really coming back to that timeliness piece. And, in most banks, unfortunately, that whole process from accessing data, being able to kind of filter it and transform it, build the models, look for the insights and the patterns, and then deploying it into a decision is painstakingly slow. It can take weeks and even months. So by the time you've got those insights and put them into decisions, sometimes the decisions are no longer relevant. They haven't got the context, and we've all experienced it. So you get targeted with products and services that you bought weeks ago. So there's a real need to be able to speed up that whole process so that the recommendations you make are in the moment, contextual and timely.
Questions are coming through. We'll be with you in just 1 second. We're not long from your questions, but one final thing. It's a big question, but we'll keep it as short as we can. Brush strokes on regulation. You know, it's all very well, but freedoms are restricted, and also recommendations from regulators are important. And they're designed to help us, the consumer. They're also designed to give clarity for banks. How will regulation, do you think, influence, or maybe the broad direction regulation could go in to help?
So I think it goes back to that trust element, because if you have the trust, people who own their data are willing to share that data, and that then enables you to do whatever in terms of improving your service, your products, and everything else. If you don't have that trust, it doesn't matter, and the regulation is just designed to make sure that you don't, or bad actors don't go and break that trust.
Particularly with open banking and the third parties and all those partners. Do you think that again, it's crystal ball territory or predictive analytics, whichever you choose? But do you think that regulators in this country and perhaps around Europe, as well as the US and more, do you think that there'll be more help to help business to do the right thing, to help customers? Do you think that it'll be more helpful than punitive? What do you think, Matt?
I do. So the EU just came out with a new AI regulation, just a few weeks back. So it's starting to happen more. We're having more of those conversations. It's going to take time, but certainly, and regulators are starting to work together to understand that this is a part of a framework. But we also need to make sure, and trust is actually one of the first words on that regulation, has to be there, it has to be fully embedded.
I completely agree. In the UK particularly, the regulator is very helpful. Actually, in 2019, the FCA and the BO, the Bank of England, created a survey with major firms, which we reply, and on the back of that, wrote 2 papers recommending a series of actions like increase the governance levels on AI, data management, go back to the basics, get the data quality right, all those kind of things. So this exercise has been done proactively by them in order to understand the industry and provide recommendations, which is actually helpful.
Really helpful. Okay, you never know, that question may come up in your questions, which it's time for now. It's been a deep discussion so far. We hope that you found the insights, the practical ideas from our panel really useful today. But we're not finished yet, obviously, because it's now time to hear from you. Thanks very much for sending in your questions, your comments through Twitter and the webpage. We'll get to them in just 1 second. Before we do that, please, if you can, take a very quick moment to rate today's webinar so far. A little poll will be on your feed right about now. Your response is, of course, confidential, but really useful to us. So thanks very much. Let us know what you think of it so far. Top score, if you feel like it. Okay, question from Bev Bartlett from Nationwide. Hello, Bev. How do you tackle the challenge of data silos in the organization? Now, that came up earlier on. It is one of the core bits that we have to talk about. Silos. Let's start off with you, Angel. So, silos block it all, and without that, there's no data sharing, there's no working together, there's no productive new organization. What do you think?
The critical component of the entire end-to-end life cycle is the data engineering in order to break silos. So to have a data warehouse, data lake, or common landing zone where all different data sets from different applications are consolidated and are on the right format with the right quality is critical. For that, a data engineering capability, a solid and sound engineering capability is critical.
And just really quick, because what we don't talk about enough is the beginning part. So Beth, you bring up the silos. You have to get the data first. And I think for any of us that have experience, it's grabbing the data, especially from the different silos, becomes the daunting challenge. Yeah. And so having a good and negotiating with your stakeholders and those that are providing you with that data and making it real for them as well, right? Yeah. How would this benefit me in my process is absolutely critical in the beginning stages when gathering that data, and then absolutely on how once you have that, having a platform that can enable that centralization, scalable engineering is fundamental.
I mean, surely, particularly with legacy, the walls are still up in many ways, and so you have to convince people it's worth doing this.
Yeah, and I think you don't have to wait until you've got all of your data in one place, and that's a mistake that some organisations make, and that you're not actually taking any action. And so if you start with the outcome, what are the particular decisions that we want to impact?
Yeah.
And then work backwards and look at, well, what data would we need? You may find that that data is available and accessible and in the right format today. So I would advise, don't wait until you've got all your data in one data lake and fully accessible.
Any thoughts, Shashank?
No, I think I fully agree, and it goes back to the parallel track that Matt talked about earlier. You've got to show value, but also alongside you need to have that bigger vision of getting all the data in shape.
It's important to show how much my life, my operation within the organisation is going to benefit from this as well. It will make life easier once you get over that initial hurdle, which is starting to share, starting to add to your workload potentially. That's the initial thing, I guess. Let's move on. We have a question here from Chris Brown, Senior Analytics Manager at Virgin Money. Hello, Chris. Thanks for writing in today. What impact does GDPR have on creating individually tailored products? Regulation, I knew it would come in somewhere. Does it? I mean, it's supposed to enable, with consent, with good data used in the right way. That's supposed to help, right? Would it get in the way?
Yeah, I think GDPR has actually served to really educate consumers about the value of the data that they share with organisations. And so, that's in part actually been why consumer expectations have increased, because they understand the value of the data. And as Matt said earlier, they're expecting a value in return. And so those individuals that do choose to share data with you, they want to see that the bank is using that data to show you know them as an individual, you understand them, and that you're delivering those personalised services and products.
Matt first, yeah.
Couldn't agree more, and I think it's also forcing the investment for large organizations to put privacy and technology front and center. So I think without these types of regulations that are putting the customer first, that investment wouldn't be there. So.
Yes, you have to have those micro silos around that information. That's what's changed.
I think this is sort of also, it allows you some sort of competitive differentiation, and this goes back to an anecdote. So now if you go to any site, right, you have the same cookies popping up and permissions. And what I do is I notice there are sites which will enable everything and then allow you to disable and make it harder for you to disable stuff. And I hate those sites.
Yeah.
So it's that. So how do you use that data is critical now. And if you provide the customer that trust, great.
It's really true. It's actually, I've found the same thing, is I will veer away from that site if it's forcing me. And often that's like a newspaper, perhaps. They'll force you into that route. Well, I don't need you. It makes a choice, which is quite interesting. So a competitive advantage is definitely very clear there. Question from Avni Bhatt from Financial Times. Hello, Avni. Will data-driven banking override traditional banking practices in the near future? I think the near future is the big question here. They have to work alongside for the time being, don't they, Angel? But after a bit of time, of course.
Yeah, spot on. Actually, you answered the question.
Sorry. That was accidental, by the way, in case you want to. Yeah. But that is true, yeah.
To say. No, yeah. They have to live together for a while, and in the future, near future, well, medium, long term, is going in that way.
Yeah.
That is where.
I guess the question is when, and I guess the question when depends on who you are and what you're doing and what your customers really need. Again, it's a broad answer, but what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, and the investment that you're making, you brought up the earlier question around ambition to Shashank, and that was a tough question to take on.
Love that question.
But it really was. Yeah. But it really does go back to that, and how ambitious are you, and how much investment are you making in these types of technologies? Are you embedding it into your strategy? And that will dictate how long it will take, and also the complexity of your infrastructure in the current state, right? Different organizations have grown differently, are in different starting points.
Well, look at the new challenger banks who are, online only, give or take, who are based on that. The whole design is based around that. And then you look at, for example, Metro Bank, who made a play of being a physical, not red brick, but physical bank. Doesn't this again mean there's going to be a differentiation in the market potentially? Of course, some will be more profitable than others, but the services, if you make it unique, you make that your business. That's going to be the upshot of all this, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's many organisations that are already fully data driven, and so there is no option I think for banks, if you want to remain competitive and you want to remain relevant, your strategy has to be that you will become entirely data-driven in all of your decision-making.
Can you see, it's just a random question really in some ways, Shashank, but can you see a place in the market where the market will be very, very busy, it is already, but where there are banks that are absolutely about people, and there are others that are about processing? Do you think this separation of functions will really ever appear in this market?
So I think to an extent it probably is already appearing, because if you look at sort of the profile of people, let's say, who are using the neobanks, it's different. And again, it comes back to Tiffany's point of there is segmentation, there is difference in behavior, and you need to sort of talk to that segment of one. And you can choose as a business to say, I will only serve these customers, or I want to serve everyone, or I want to serve these other set of customers.
Yeah. To be honest with you, in the way we're going, of course, with the use of technology and our interaction with technology, it's a bit unlikely that you'll ever have an old school bank and that's all they do. But still, and the data has to be cleansed and has to be usable anyway. But that's great. Thank you very much. Hannah Westwood, final question from HSBC, one of your colleagues. How can we use data to not only make customer interactions easy and seamless, but also strengthen the relationship with the customer? Now, we talked about this a little bit earlier on, but let's just go through that. This is what it's all about. It's about relationship via the use of data, isn't it really, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talked about, so let's start from the very beginning around, data being the oil and refining it. When you can take all of the different interactions that you may have with a bank in these different silos. So I'm a bank, I might start with a cash management account, but then I start expanding my operations globally. I need some foreign exchange to manage, mitigate my currency risk. Yeah. All these are different interactions. Being data-driven allows you to understand when I'm having these different type of interactions, which should start to inform the types of products and services I need at that time. So being data-driven allows you to start putting those connections together and allowing you to inform the right type of engagement at the right time.
So let's just sum up and finish off how important, in brief, Khare, is being data-centric, being data-driven. How important is it to flip that into that mode now?
Yeah, well, it's critical because your competitor is doing it.
Yeah.
So if your competitor is doing it, means that your customers can receive a service from the competitor that is not receiving from you now. So I believe whoever is not doing it is going to be left apart, and it's going to be...
But it's essentially, it is about enabling. These tools are about enabling a better service, aren't they? So you cannot forget, and you must always bear in mind, I assume, the person-to-person contact.
Absolutely. I think, again, banking at its core is person-to-person. It's about the relationship. So you need to figure out how do you sustain that relationship. And it may be that the customer wants to, let's say, interface mostly through a digital channel. But there are places where the customer does want a physical channel. So if you look at mortgages, first-time buyers, 90% or so say that they would want to talk to someone before they take that mortgage.
This gets you there. It's about the outcomes, isn't it? So fundamentally, what do I have to, what attitude, what necessarily the steps will be complicated, but what attitude do I have to now take into my bank to make sure that I can have the people working well with technology, that the technology is going to look at my issues and find solutions? What should I do? Go home right now, go back to the office right now, and look at if I haven't already. What do you think?
I think there's an opportunity now for banks to go and look at the decisions that are being made across the bank, whether that's by systems or by frontline workers, and look to assess the time and effort that's made, that's required to make those decisions, and also how accurate and consistent and profitable they are, and identify where is the opportunity, which of those decisions can we apply data and analytics to really move the needle.
That'll do nicely. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. I hope you've enjoyed the past hour, that it's provided a few useful tips, lots of them possibly, that will help you to improve decision-making and unlock the power of data-driven banking. Thanks very much for sending in your questions, and sorry we couldn't get to them all. But before you go, if you could, just spend a couple of minutes with us, do fill in the wider feedback poll, which again will be on your discussion feed right about now. We really want to know how useful this webinar has been to you, so let us know if you could. And if you'd like to hear more about the topics that we've been discussing today, along with many other topics, including open banking, digital transformation, and customer experience, do join us this June at our MoneyLIVE digital banking event in London on the 30th of June to the 1st of July. A link with further information can be found on your feed. Well, thanks again to our panel, and many thanks to SAS for supporting our webinar today. Until next time, all the best. Take care of yourself. See you then.